And now we're going to just jump right into the development of rhythmic variation. And the idea here is to get into some middle ground and break away to larger ground on the top and smaller ground on the bottom. If you can see how notes are divided and how each measure is limited to the amount of beats it can hold, you'll start fitting note values into the measures. Starting with quarter notes, we can put 2 together to get a half note, and 4 together to get a whole note. Going in the opposite direction, smaller units, there are subdivisions called eighth notes, 16th notes, 32nd notes. Now if we add 2 quarter notes together, we get the value of 1 half note. So there's 4 quarter notes in the first measure. The second measure, we've basically taken the 2 quarter notes and made them into 1 half note. The third measure, we take the first 2 quarter notes and turn them into a half note. This leaves us with 2 quarter notes, which you can see on the right side of that measure. Now we could take those 2 quarter notes and turn them into a half note. So we have 2 half notes in the measure. And we can also start the measure with 2 quarter notes and have 1 half note to complete the measure. Now anywhere you see a half note, we can put a half rest. Anywhere you see a quarter note, you can fill in a quarter rest, where there'll be 1 beat of silence. We need 4 quarter notes to equal 1 whole note. Now, as we divide quarter notes, we're going to go south here. We're going to go down into more subdivisions, and we'll get 8 eighth notes. Now look how many possibilities you get combining quarter notes with eighth notes. We have 4 quarter notes in the first measure, 8 eighth notes. Okay, we've done that, but now look, we take 1 quarter note, leaving 6 eighth notes. Or we could start with the 6 eighth notes and leaving 1 quarter note at the end. 2 quarter notes will leave 4 eighth notes in the measure, etc. You could see all these different variations. Now, if we go further, we can break down quarter notes into 16th notes. Now, this is going to give us a lot more combinations, possibilities. Even when we add eighth notes to this, can you imagine how complex it can get? When a measure is visually longer, it does not mean that it's played longer. Remember those boxes with the red, blue, green cerulean? These wider measures with 16th notes in them are the same length as what you get in the first measure. So they may look longer, but they take the same amount of time. So the first measure, if it was going 1, 2, 3, 4, the second measure would go 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a da 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 da. Same amount of time it takes to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So for 2 minutes, I want you to work on this diagram here. It's all E. Learn to play whole, half, quarter, eighth, and 16th notes within the same amount of time. Okay? I'm going to do this for you. Let's put the metronome on. Keep it on 60. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1E and a 2E and a 3E and a 4E and a 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright, that's how it should sound when you're working on it. Keep getting that till you get it to all fit within the time frame. But not all music is duple and quadruple meter. So far what we've seen is either duple or quadruple within common time. There is triple meter. This is in common time. We can have triple meter. Dotted half notes are 3 beats. They fill a measure of 3/4 time. They will take up 3/4 worth. When we put dots next to the note head, it means what? That we're adding an additional 1/2 of length of the note to the note. So look again here. Remember, this is not 6/8 time. This dotted half note is going to be 3 beats. It's like saying a half note plus 1/2 of a half note is saying half note plus quarter note, because a quarter note is a half of a half note. So the dot means half note plus quarter note, which is 2 plus 1. That is 3 beats. So we're still looking in simple meter. Don't confuse them with dotted notes in compound meter, such as 6/8 or 12/8. So take a look at the comparisons here. We have the simple meter count, 1, 2, 3, and then the compound meter count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1 and a 2 and a. So it's interesting that looking at a dotted half note in 3/4 time is 3 beats, and in a sense, the 6-beat dotted half note in 6/8 time is actually, or can be counted as 2 beats. All right. So 3/4 time on the second level, we're showing you dotted quarter notes. You have 1 and 2. It's a beat and a half. A beat plus a half a beat. So it's like saying a quarter note plus an eighth note. 1 and 2. Now the rest of the measure is filled out by and 3 and. 3 beats in the measure. And the ands count as the upbeats. So we count 1 and upbeat, 2 downbeat. That's the beginning of the second beat. The second part, the upbeat, is the next and, represented by a cross or a plus sign. So the second note in the 3/4 time on the second level there is and 3 and. So we get, playing a C, 1 and 2 and 3 and 1 and 2 and 3 and. Now in 6/8 time, and that's written on a B there, second level, middle line B, we count that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 1 and a 2 and a 1 and a 2 and a. Now you're seeing a lot of dotted quarter notes in a row, which usually doesn't happen. Usually they break up a dotted quarter note and pair it off with a single eighth note. But I want to be strict here, and we're going to count that bottom measure on the left-hand side, the 3/4. So it's 1E and 2E and 3E and Okay, that probably doesn't mean too much to you now, but that's strictly breaking it up. And we have the 6/8 measure. We have 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 and. All right, just bear with me, and a lot of this stuff will come together. So in 3/4 we can have 1 dotted half, 3 quarter notes, and a half note plus 1 quarter note. So we have 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Let's try it again. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. There are 2 ways a dotted note can show with a quarter note in 4/4 time. One where the dotted note first, the other where the dotted note is last. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Learn both ways of doing that and learn how to count it. Now here's what I was talking about before, about the dotted notes breaking off with single eighth notes. They're paired with single eighth notes. So we found the first two notes here, counted 1 and 2 and. The second two notes are counted 3 and 4 and. So the dotted note is 1 and 2, and then we're left with an eighth note, a single eighth note. And the same thing happens throughout the rest of the measure. Here we go, counting this off. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and this is common in most music. You see the dotted quarter note followed by an eighth note. This happens very often. I'm going to play this a little faster too, like 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so the note following the dotted quarter note is a single eighth note. They don't use beams for single eighth notes. They use what's called a flag, that little curly line reaching up to the note head. So each dotted note is worth 3 eighth notes. That's why it's counted 1 and 2. And the plus sign is, by the way, the and, which I've already told you. So we're looking at 1 and 2 and, which completes 2 beats. Jumping further down into smaller subdivisions, the proportions remain the same. Observe the arrows in the next frame. We're counting 16th notes on the bottom. It would be 1 E and 2 E and 3. We've done that before. But now check out when we connect the first 3 16th notes. The 1 E and 2 E and So at a faster speed, it's 1 E and 2 E and 3 and 4. So to make it easier to count, we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So again, the dotted eighth note points to 3 16th notes. If we want to count 16 notes as syllables, we use 1 E and 2 E and. As the top line shows, if we're only counting a dotted eighth note, and not 3 16ths, only the first syllable is counted, and the last syllable, the ah. The E and the and can be heard silently in your head so that the dotted note is not rushed. 1, 2, 3, okay? There's another combination that holds the longer note in the middle or in between 2 shorter notes. Here's a table for the various note values as they get smaller. Let's play around with this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now it'll be the same thing in its lower subdivision. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Here we have the bottom 1 E and or the 1 E 2 E. I'm going to leave the and out. 1 E, 2 E, 3 E, 4 E, 1 E, 2 E, 3 E, 4 E. What if we were to count the and in there, which is silent right now? Let's try it. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and okay, so instead we count 1 E, 2 E, 3 E, 4 E, 1 E, 2 E, 3 E, 4 E. Okay. And so the bottom line is missing the and I just explained what that was all about. So now triplets. We are dealing with equal amounts of time fitting within equal frameworks. Within any span of time, we can divide in 3. So, in the amount of the space of 1 unit, such as a quarter note, we can put 3 notes. This is called a triplet. Observe the top line. 1, 2, 3, 4. And there's a quarter note rest, so we're not doing anything there. 1, 2, 3, 4. But now watch. We're going to replace the quarter note with a triplet, an eighth note triplet, and we're going to replace the 2 quarter notes with a quarter note triplet. Okay, I'm going to play the bottom. 1, 2, 3, 4. That one's a bit hard to count out loud with. The eighth note triplet is equal to 1 quarter note. The quarter note triplet is equal to 2 quarter notes. So for 1 minute, in the following diagram, read, play, count out loud 1 and 2 and, etc. Read, play, and count blueberry, blueberry on the bottom. So you get that 1 and a 2 and a feel. So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and that equals blueberry, 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 blueberry. Or you can count 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a... Okay? So if you put groups of triplets together, it'll sound exactly like compound meter. Here it is in simple meter. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, 2, 3, 4. Here it is in 12/8. 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4 and a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Well, that's pretty interesting, eh? Now with 16th notes, there are 16 possible notes and 16 possible rests, which leaves us with a tremendous amount of rhythmic possibility. Look at all those rests. Same thing can be done with quarter notes, but you're not going to get as varied a production. Look at that. Here's 16th notes on the first level. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 3, 4, 4, 2, 3, 4. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a... Now watch this counting slower in the second level. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and... Let's try the bottom. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and... Let me do that last one again. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and... You can play these notes if you hear every rest. After practicing what you see later, the whole gestalt will take over and you'll instinctively hear the groove created by the notes. So let's look at that middle one. We have 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and... So a little faster. Okay. All right, I'll let you play around with that. So, check this exercise out. On any note or any chord, read, play, and count this diagram. It's the same proportion of notes. And we got 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Second one. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4, and. Third one. 1, 2, 3, and 4, E, and. Now I put this last one in here for kind of a goof. It's when you're counting 32nd notes, you have to add ida and ida and. So we're going to say 1 and 2 e ida and. All right, so we're going to count it 1 and 2 e and ida. Again, 1 and 2 e and ida. All right, don't even try that last one. You might hurt yourself. Just kidding. So, we're going to jump into the next video called Syncopation.